Welcome, everyone, to the first meeting of our 2022 Residents Association year. I do need to start, as always, by reading our fire code. In the event of fire alarm sounds, please remain in the auditorium and stay seated. Should there be a need to evacuate, a Springmore staff member will direct you on how to leave in an orderly fashion. Please remember not to use elevators and to go to a red pole once outside. The first thing I want to do is to introduce you to the new executive committee for 2022. And the first person I would like to recognize is the past president, Julia McCullers. Is Julia here? I don't think she is. However, I will go ahead and read for her benefit what I have written. Julia, thank you for giving your time and efforts to Springmore in 2021. The year certainly did not go as planned because we all found ourselves in the midst of a pandemic. Your positive attitude and encouraging words exemplified your commitment and helped us all maintain as much of our normal lives as possible. We are grateful for your leadership under difficult circumstances, and I am happy that you, as past president, will still be a part of our leadership team. Let's give her a hand regardless. And now I'd like to introduce you to the other members of the executive committee, and please stand when your name is called. Dave Waters, Vice President. Janet Carter, Secretary. A.J. Gardner, Director. Carol Bryan, Director. Barbara Smith, Director. And Jim Bundy, Director. These are great people to work with, and I'm sure you're delighted to have them. Thank you. And now we have some short announcements. The first person will be Carrie Ritchie.
Good afternoon. Just briefly, this weekend we sent out a flyer called the 12 Months of Wellness. We did it in December for the 12 days, and it was very well received, so we're going to do it all year. So just something fun to do if you want to. Also in January, we have the Fan Club, Fitness and Nutrition Club, next week, so sign up if you'd like to join us. It's in your pathways and on the portal. And then we also have the Forks Over Knives documentary. So if you're interested in healthy eating or just learning more, that will be in the University Theater, Tuesday, January 25th. The Rex Mobile Mammogram schedule for February is full. We started registering beginning of January. So if there's any ladies that want to be on the wait list, please call me so I can get you on my list for their next event. And now I'm going to give a couple announcements for Lori, the chaplain. She is out at an appointment. She wanted me to remind you about Tranquil Tuesdays. That will happen tomorrow, January 11th, and next week, the 18th, 2 p.m. in 273A. It's an introductory mindfulness class. And also, if you would like to order their book for the February book study, it is called Vesper Time, The Spiritual Practice of Growing Older. And they will meet in February, South Village on Mondays, and North Village on Tuesdays. So if you're interested in that, please contact Lori to order a book. Have a great day.
And now we have Daniel Sakaris, our IT Director.
Good afternoon, everybody. I saw some of you last Thursday, I believe. I want to thank those that came to our presentation for our new resident portal. That I think it was a success, and I'm looking forward to things to come with the portal. I would like to extend an invite to those of you that did not get to show up at that event, or if you'd like to come again and get a refresher. We have another training on January 19th. That is a Wednesday at 10 a.m. in here in the auditorium. If you would like to get your photo made for the portal and have not done so, and I can upload that for you, we have 2 dates, January 14th, which is this Friday at South Village in the Raleigh Room at 2 p.m., and January 21st, which is in North Village in the lobby by the front desk at 2 p.m. So I look forward to seeing some of you at those to get some photos on the portal, and thank you again.
At this point, we have an announcement from Dining Services, and it's going to be given by Judy Bork from Sodexo.
Hello, everybody. Gosh, it's nice to see so many of you here. Just a couple things. If you by chance came into the dining room here at North Village yesterday, I had a little piece of paper up in case you were having to stand in line during brunch. And what that showed was that since the first of the year, Dining Services has had over 22 people, plus 2 more that happened yesterday, that are either out having tested positive or are in quarantine. 24 people in our department is just a few. So we appreciate your patience with us as we have to kind of navigate around shifting some people around. In light of that, we are unfortunately going to have to close breakfast in the grill here on North Village for the rest of this week. Our gal Quilla did test positive. We've got Boone is out on a much-deserved vacation, and we just don't have enough people in the kitchen to pull in to help support that area. As well as we have an employee we found out today who lost their father over the weekend, so that will also need us to shut the grill down all day on this coming Saturday. So we really apologize. We know how special that is for several of you, but we're just trying to do the best we can. So thank you for that. And then I'm just going to plant a little bug. We as a management team are working on some really great new things we're very excited about. And those of you that are on the dining committee will be the first to know some of the things that we're going to propose. So when we meet with you next week, hold on tight because we're going to rock the house. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
And now our last announcement, but certainly not least, is our Executive Director, Brandon Hare.
Hi, good afternoon. Good to see everybody. It's a great crowd. I got an interesting topic today, so which I'm as interested about as anybody. So, won't be too long. Just want to go to a couple of important things. Thank Judy for being here. How long have you been here now, Judy? Yeah, seems like forever, but thank goodness we've had Judy. She's so great, and that's one of the benefits of having Sodexo is having somebody come in when we're transition of dining directors, and we couldn't ask for a better person than Judy. So we're so blessed to have her. We're still working on our dining service director search. We have a really good candidate that we hope to hopefully have a decision on by the end of the week. I know some of y'all met this individual, and I thought he was really good and very positive, and had nothing but overwhelmingly positive comments to say about this person. So we're trying to finalize that. It's when you get a bigger position and somebody moving and family and stuff like that, it's a little more complicated than just somebody just jumping up and no kids and no roots anywhere to come relocate for a job. So we hope to have that by the end of the week, and I'll make sure everybody knows how the search is going, and if we can make things happen with this person, or if we need to continue on our search. So we just want to make sure we have the right person, so we're taking our time. I wanted to just go over a few things regarding just COVID and things that you're probably hearing, and just I'm not going to take any questions because it would just take forever. But if you have any questions, just email me or call. I'll be happy to answer that. A couple of people have asked about visitation in the health center and not understanding why we have not shut that down. So back before November, it was, if you were in outbreak status, you had to shut down visitation. There was no question asked. That was a state requirement, and we couldn't allow visitors in. Well, since then, they have changed that, and with the majority of the people being vaccinated and staff being vaccinated, now we can no longer restrict visitation in person into the health center. So if people are wondering, well, why are still people coming in? Because they that is now the law, and before it was opposite. So again, with the people being vaccinated and with the symptoms being much more milder with staff and residents, and with the loneliness and all the depression it caused with not having visitors, they have since changed that. So I want everybody to know that. I did come up here this weekend and meet with staff and inform them of that, because they were not aware of that either. But there's about 7 things that visitors have to do that I won't bore you with. But so if you go into the health center to visit someone, you'll see when you sign up, you're handed this piece of paper, these 7 things. Basically, just go straight to visit the resident and then leave. So I did want to address that. The second thing is, I had a resident that wanted me to talk about the 5-day quarantine versus the 10-day quarantine. So I think people have heard that. So I'm just going to read this real quick. Hopefully this will address his question and what he wanted me to go over. And basically it says the CDC is shortening the recommendation time for isolation for public. For the public, people with COVID-19 should isolate for 5 days, and if they're asymptomatic or symptoms are resolving without fever for 24 hours, they would continue to wear masks for 5 days. And basically the change is motivated by science demonstrating that the majority of COVID-19 transmission occurs in the early course of the illness, generally the first 1 or 2 days. So that's why it's a 5-day period. Additionally, CDC is updating the quarantine for anybody, individuals who have been exposed. So if you've received both vaccines and your booster shot, and you've been exposed to somebody with COVID, you don't have to quarantine. Only if you develop symptoms do you need to quarantine and be tested. So that's all been changed as well. So. Again, we're seeing much milder symptoms. They do come so fast that the people are backed up so much with the test results that we're testing people. And if we get results back of somebody positive, the 5 days have already passed and they wouldn't even quarantine. So when you see the stuff on the news about the hours and hours of people waiting in line to get tested and the backlogs, I can tell you that's true, that's happening with the abundance of testing. It's taking a while for it to get back. But that is why the isolation period is much less. We don't have any residents right now with COVID. We have probably about 9 employees right now, though, that have it. So, and then lastly, I wanted to read this that I think what I just read, it comes from all of this. And this title, it says, Risk of COVID-19 Death Rare in Unvaccinated, even among high-risk seniors. So this was a study done by the CDC. It says the risk of death for COVID-19 is not only rare among unvaccinated, but it's also among those with a high risk, adults 65 and over. It said among the 1.2 million who completed an initial vaccine between December 2020 and October 2021, outcomes were rare. Severe outcomes occurred in 189 people out of 10,000, so that's 1.5 people. And then the deaths were 0.3, so 36 deaths among 10,000 people. So again, the symptoms we're seeing with this are much milder. So the vaccinations are working. They're not bulletproof. People are still getting it, but this much more milder, which I think is leading to all the things I just read about. So if you have any specific questions, let me know. Try to update everybody on that. I do send stuff to the health center family members that y'all may not see, just to update them on what's going on in the health center. But if you have any questions, let me know. And good to see everybody. Thank you.
And now I will introduce Dave Waters, who is the Vice President and is in charge of programs for the Residents Association meetings. Dave, you will introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon, Springmorians. That's an invented word. Our speaker today is Chris Brady. Chris is a leadership and management expert and a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, humorist, and businessman. He has been listed among the top 200 most influential authors in the world and recognized among the best 25 management and leadership blogs, and as a top business expert. Chris and his wife, Terry, we're honored to have Terry with us this afternoon as well, have 4 children and live in Cary, North Carolina. Chris's latest book is called The Bitcoin Bride. This is a compelling fictional story that is the first of its kind in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency space and teaches the reader everything needed to get started in understanding Bitcoin. Today you will learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, why it's valuable, and how it affects individual freedom and opportunities. Let's give a warm Springmore welcome to Chris as he explains this topic. And you can take your mask off.
All right, very good. I might sound a lot clearer with it off. Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and to talk about Bitcoin. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being an expert, 1 you don't know anything, raise your hands if you're a 1 or less. That's about what I thought. Is anybody a 5? All right. Is anybody a 10 and should come up here and take the microphone from me? Okay, good. I'll relax. I got my one buddy here to correct me in case I'm wrong on anything. Well, I was told to keep it very basic, and that's what the book does. I was asked, why did you write this book? And what happened is people would find out that I'm interested in Bitcoin, that I'm an investor in Bitcoin, and it would dominate the conversation. It would go through the rest of the lunch or the dinner or wherever we happen to be. And every time I would walk away from an encounter like that, I wished I had something to hand to someone so they could get a little smarter on it on their own. And there's a lot of books about Bitcoin out there, but they're all of the same stripe. They're all expository. They're all written in a business format. And frankly, it can be kind of boring to read about the details of a computer program. You better really be into it. So the rock group Kiss, I don't know if any of you remember them. I saw them interviewed years ago, and Gene Simmons said that we simply became the band that we could never find to watch in concert. And that's what this book is. I just wrote the book I could never seem to find to hand to that person that would have a little chat with me about Bitcoin. So it's a fictional story, and it's designed to kind of suck you into the story and the characters, and you accidentally learn about Bitcoin along the way. And so we've sold 2 or 3 copies, and somehow Dave got a hold of one. And I figured, he's 1/3 of my readership, so I better come support it. I'm just kidding. But I did bring a stack of books here today, and I guess they're going to give them out as door prizes, and then there'll be a couple to be put in the library too. So I didn't come here to sell any books. I came to talk about a subject that's just endlessly fascinating to me, and I believe it is very valuable for people. And so I really enjoy spreading the message about this. And to tell the story of Bitcoin, why it matters for you and why you would even care, is to start 2,550 years ago. It actually goes back to the 550s BC. Now, before that, as far as archaeologists and historians can gather, gold, the element gold, item 89 on the periodic table, I think it's number 89, has been used in one form or another as money. Gold just seems to have been discovered early and used as a medium of exchange between people when they wanted things. Now, you'll hear the story told about bartering, and ancient civilizations bartered. There's actually no evidence for that. It's just a logical thought game, but there's no historical evidence anywhere that bartering ever actually happened, because it does happen a little bit. You'll have people that, they'll wash your car and then you'll give them some advice on something. It happens in small, but for a full economy to function just on barter, there's a lot of historical scholarship now that suggests that maybe it was never very extensive, because every civilization they find seems to always had ledgers or gold or a combination of the two. Now, a ledger would be where they would write down that I did this work for so-and-so, and then therefore they owe me 10 hours, and they're going to send one of their slaves over to work off those 10 hours. As a matter of fact, some of the earliest writing that historians can find comes out of Egypt, And it's those exact things. It's ledgers recording debts owed and credits given. And so gold and ledgers have been used as money since way back. And in the 550s BC, there was a kingdom that only stood for 3 generations. It was called Lydia, and it was in western modern-day Turkey. And 2 big things happened in Lydia that changed the course of money for the rest of human history, at least up until our day, until Bitcoin. They did 2 things. The first thing the king of Lydia did was he coined money. He coined gold. He stamped gold into universal amounts that would readily be recognized as a coin. Now, nobody knows what the unit was or what they called it, but all the gold coins that are stamped, and you can still find these and buy them, they're quite valuable as you'd imagine, they were all universal. They were fungible, which means you could spend one and it meant just what any other one. They were interchangeable. Now, coining then was a big invention, because now you didn't have to resort to weights and measures and all those cumbersome things. You could just trust that it was one coin, however much it was worth. But the second thing is really the thing that made Bitcoin necessary 2.5 millennium later. The second thing is it's very subtle, but with the invention of government coins, you suddenly had government involved in the money. Government was never involved in the money before, and suddenly they were. And it didn't take long for that invention to populate. The Roman Empire was big on this, and they minted their own coins, their own silver coins, their own bronze coins, and yes, their own gold coins. And it wasn't very long before they figured out how to cheat. And they would bring in the coins, melt them down, mix them with a little bit of lesser metals, and then mint them looking the same as the pure coins, and then they'd circulate them out, and then they'd bring it in and do it again. And this is called debasing. It's where you're promised the value of a unit of money, but the government actually intentionally steals it. Now, people would do it too. They'd shave off a corner of the coin. They'd clip off corners and shave off corners, then keep that and mold their own coin. And so gold is good for money, but it's subject to debasing. And governments did that all the way. And then in about 1913, the United States, right around the beginning of World War I, the United States got off the gold standard. It began the process of getting off the gold standard, and it fully got off the gold standard by 1971. Oh, I would love to take hours and just go through this history. It's fascinating to me, at least. The rest of you it might put to sleep, and 2 or 3 of us would be interested. But what resulted in 1971 was you have a worldwide system in which the U.S. dollar is under the control of the central bank of the United States called the Federal Reserve. And all the other currencies of the world, this happened by 1974, all the other currencies of the world fluctuate in relation to the U.S. dollar. But most international settlement is in the dollar. The oil business globally is in the dollar. Every country that carries a surplus or a deficit trade balance with the United States, they settle up in dollars. And so the U.S. dollar is really the reserve currency of the world. And the story of what's happened to the value of the dollar since 1913, and even more violently since 1971, is a study in debasement. And the way that you measure debasement, which is the losing of the value of the U.S. dollar, it's a term called inflation. And they've packaged up a number for us called CPI, Consumer Price Index, Consumer Price Index, and it's meant to reflect how much prices have gone up. Well, there's a mechanism for this. There's a reason why prices go up. Believe it or not, if you'd been born, take your birth date, the year you were born, subtract 100 from it. If you'd been born in that year, and then you would have lived up until 1922 instead of 2022. Believe it or not, with very little exception until those last couple decades of your life, prices didn't go up. They didn't go up, they just didn't. As a matter of fact, in many cases, prices went down a little bit, which means your money actually got more valuable, which meant it was really smart to save your money. But when money loses its value over time, it's actually not good mathematically to save, because you're saving something that's like an ice cube melting. Every now and then, there are these cataclysmic events that cause money to be debased even faster. So there's only 2 ways government pay for what they have. One is taxes, as we all know, and the other one is borrowing. Well, the only time in my lifetime that the government has balanced their budget were in the last 4 years of Clinton. That's it. In my entire time of being an American citizen, we've had exactly 4 years where the government paid all of its bills without going into debt further. All those other years, it means the taxes weren't sufficient to cover the hungry spending habits of the government, and so they had to borrow. There's a complicated mechanism that goes through the central bank and uses the issuance of government bonds, but essentially, they print money. Now, not really, I mean, they do print some money, but essentially it puts new dollars in circulation. And those new dollars in circulation mean that there's more dollars fighting for the same amount of goods, which means the prices of those goods go up. I've got this very valuable book right here, and if I were going to do an auction right now, I'd say, hey, give me a dollar. Somebody might raise their hand, but you wouldn't be very smart to do that because there's some free ones, so you wouldn't really. But let's pretend that you wanted to bid on this book. And let's say that I was a real good auctioneer and I got it all the way up to $20 and we sold this book for $20. Well, if someone came in and gave everybody $1,000 as you were walking in, they just peeled off and gave you $1,000 as you walked in, what would be likely to happen to the value of the bids on this book as a result of everybody being $1,000 richer? I mean, you got those 10 new $100 bills in your pocket, and they're burning a hole in your pockets. You might be tempted to pay a little more for the book. And so the price would go up. You see how that works? And lots of you probably understand it. So that's inflation. When the government spends beyond its means, it has to print more money to pay those bills. And when it does, it causes inflation. Now, there's other causes of inflation. I won't go into them. But one of the two biggest ones is government overspending. Now, there's an interesting website you can go to. It's called WTF Happened 1971. WTF Happened 1971.com. And it shows all these charts of the value of the dollar up until 1971 when we went off the gold standard and how much it's crashed since then. It shows how much government spending has gone up since then. It showed how much federal debt has gone up since then. It's shown how much our debt has risen against our GDP since then. And it goes into, and it's an easy website. You just scroll down and it's just chart after chart after chart. The point is when you take away the control of the issuance of new money and leave it in the hands of a small committee of people who aren't elected, they tend to press print. Data speaks for itself. The reason that means anything to you and me outside of the interest that it is economically is it steals the value of our savings. And so you can't just save anymore like my grandparents did of their generation because you almost have two jobs. You have to make your money and then you have to learn how to invest your money. You have two jobs. And investing is risky and it's complicated and it costs money to hire an advisor that knows what they're doing. And so we're in a real conundrum because you can't simply just work hard and get good at what you do and save money for a rainy day. Instead, we're taught to go into debt and mortgage our future sunny days. So every now and then, as I started to say a minute ago, there's a cataclysmic event that the government responds to by printing even more money precipitously. One of those was 2008. You guys remember the financial crisis of 2008? All of us can probably name people who lost their home, lost a job, turned in the keys to their home, were devastated financially. It happened, it was widespread. And the government responded with just about the only weapon they had, and that was with printing more money. They did quantitative easing. They bought assets and put them on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. And it kicked the can down the road. It got the corpse up off the operating table and got him walking around again. But now he's even more of a dead man walking. And then COVID comes around, and it's even a bigger calamity. And things were very unknown in March and April of 2020. So what did the government do? They only have one big red button in that private little room, and it says print. And anytime there's a panic, they come and smash down on the button. And so 40% of the U.S. dollars that have ever been issued in the history of the country have been issued since March of 2020. 40%. So if you happen to be of an age where you're counting on a fixed income or savings, you are the victim of those decisions. You're affected the most. In 2008, the financial crisis and all of the government intervention and debasing of the money to get us out of the problem. And again, that's another whole hours of seminars to talk about those problems and how they got created. But there were a group of people, many of them anonymous, that had been working for 25 years or more in secret, pretty much, to try to figure out how to reverse what the king of Lydia did 2,500 years before. And they wanted to come up with a money that was outside the hands of government. There was an economist named Friedrich von Hayek. And in 1984, he was being interviewed. You can see it on YouTube. He's sitting there talking, and he said, I don't think we'll ever have sound money. That's money that a government can't just debase. He said, I don't think we'll ever have sound money again because we can't rip the money out of the hands of the government. He said, until we come up with some sly, roundabout way to do it. That was what he said. Well, there were all these they called themselves cypherpunks. And it was a group of people smaller than assembled here in this room. And they mostly knew each other from an email list and a chat room. And they were using their superior ability with cryptography and computer science to try to figure out how to make money that would be independent of any central force, outside of any government, outside of any company, outside of any country, outside of any person or committee. And there were a few false starts in the 80s and the 90s and even in the aughts. And then the financial crisis in 2008 hit. And on Halloween night, 2008, and the timing is no coincidence, there was a white paper, a short white paper published to the email list of all these cryptographers, and it introduced the concept of Bitcoin. And it built on all those failed attempts before, but it had a few interesting new breakthroughs, and it tied everything together in a very elegant way. And the author, who didn't reveal who he, she, or they were, went by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. They chose a Japanese name for whatever reason, probably trying to throw people out. It's very hard to be anonymous in today's world. And they announced this idea. On January 3rd of 2009, just a couple months later, after a lot of talk back and forth on the chat rooms and the emails, this program launched. And what it effectively represented was the first successful attempt at non-government money in 2,500 years. And it started small. Only these little computer geeks even knew about it or thought about it or did anything with it. It had no value. But then, just like with the internet, if you study the history of the internet, and all of us are old enough to remember a life pre-internet, which our kids and grandkids can't even imagine, the way the internet really took off once it got released for civilian use was chat rooms. And Steve Case of AOL said it, because AOL, remember they'd mail out all those discs by the millions. You get your free AOL access to the internet through dial-up modems and all that stuff. He said the real story, the dirty little secret of how the internet got populated was people loved getting into chat rooms under anonymous names and talking dirty to each other. As odd as that is, that was the first seeding of the internet. The first people who spent a lot of time online were doing that kind of stuff. And that kind of made it had its little nefarious, dark beginning, and then off it goes. And then the next thing that came along was the internet was about information and putting up a web page, and you put information out there. The next thing the web became about was communication and talking back and forth commerce, where companies could sell things online. So information, communication, kind of the same, and then commerce. And those are the two big things the internet revolutionized. But it wrecked privacy, and it didn't do anything with the money. So these cypherpunks came along, and they invented what's essentially the internet of money. And it too had a nefarious, dirty start. I heard of it in 2013, which is considered early now. I was in a grocery store. I don't know where I'd heard of Bitcoin already, but I'd already heard of it. And I was in a grocery store, and I was standing and checking out, and there was a line of magazines, and there was a Bitcoin magazine. And I wanted to learn about it, so I bought the magazine, read the whole thing, couldn't make heads or tails of it, stuck it on the bookshelf, and forgot all about it. Well, I didn't forget all about it, but I did nothing with it. But in those days, already by 2013, Bitcoin was worth some money. It had gone from being a computer program experiment to being something that actually had a little bit of value. As a matter of fact, a Bitcoin was selling for about $200 a coin back then when I bought that little magazine. If I had put the money I put in the magazine in a Bitcoin instead, it'd be worth $30,000 or $40,000. So what happened? How did it get? Well, it got started because a young man came along by the name of Ross Ulbricht. He was in his early 20s, and he started something called Silk Road because he and a lot of the world was under the false impression that Bitcoin was anonymous. And so he built a website that sold drugs, prostitution services, every type of illegal gun, and even you could even hire someone to murder someone for you on there. It was absolutely atrocious. But he put up this site, and you'd pay by Bitcoin. You had anonymous accounts, and they would ship cocaine right to your mailbox. Well, you can imagine the FBI getting on this. And it took them only about 2.5 years to find this guy, find him, and it's a really exciting adventure story how they finally found him and arrested him in a public library, and they distracted him so they could grab his laptop while it was open, because if they closed it, it was all encrypted, they'd never get the evidence, and he's been sentenced to like 5 counts of life imprisonment. But that is what seeded and got Bitcoin going, was all these illegal uses. Now, it's still, sometimes people hear about Bitcoin and they have that taint in their head. That taint is why I wasn't that interested. I thought, even if it's a good idea, I don't want the IRS to come looking at me funny, I got to be Caesar's wife. I want to even be beyond the appearance of evil, right? And so I kind of stayed away from it. But then over the years, it kind of survived those early stages, and people found out that, well, I guess it isn't anonymous, because they tracked some of it through the ledgers and arrested this kid, arrested a whole bunch of people that were associated with it. It's pseudonymous, but not anonymous. There's a legal difference and a practical difference too. But suddenly Bitcoin had survived its infancy, and it was going up in price because the Bitcoins themselves are traded in a free market. The computer program doesn't assign any value. Like everything else, the value is determined in a free market. Well, why were people wanting these things? What are they good for? Well, for a while, they were good for buying things that were illegal. But after that, people found out that you could send these anywhere around the world practically instantly for almost no cost. And so the next wave of adopters were people who weren't looking at this as some interesting economic experiment, but these were people who had immigrated to, let's say, the United States from, pick a country, Nicaragua. And meanwhile, their family back home has a government who's absolutely trashing the currency, and they're working here hard, trying to send some money back home. Well, how do you send money back home to a developing country? Western Union? Usually that's how remittances are done. 9% they charge as a fee, which is exorbitant. And it's well-known fact that at the Western Union offices in any of these developing countries, it's dangerous to come walking out of a Western Union, because why? You're carrying cash, and everybody knows it. So if you came to the United States by hook or by crook, and you're just working hard doing something, sending money home to Mama's life is in danger, not to mention 9% gets taken in fees, and her life is in danger every time she has to go to the Western Union. And by the way, the Western Union might be a 4-hour donkey ride to the next big city. Who knows? But with Bitcoin, and strangely enough, almost everybody in the third world carries around a mobile phone connected to a cellular network. The internet missed much of the third world, but cellular didn't. It's almost everywhere. You could use your phone and send Bitcoin to Mama instantly. Nobody knows about it. Nobody can stop it. There's no permissions required. There's hardly any fees, and it's instant. And she doesn't have to endanger herself, and nobody knows. And then a local bank can convert her Bitcoin to the currency of the realm. So the next big wave was people using it to send around the world, because it's so much easier to send around the world than dollars or gold or anything else of value. Then people started noticing that its use was going up. And as its use was going up, more and more people were buying it, which meant that it was more valuable. And here come the speculators, the get-rich-quickers. That was me. What's wrong with buying something low and selling it high? As Yogi Berra used to say, buy low and sell high. And if it doesn't go up, don't buy it. If only it were that simple, right? So people started realizing that this was going up in value, and certainly speculators and gamblers would come in hoping to make a fast buck. But if you looked closer, and if you dug into the computer code, and by the way, it's a very simple computer program. It's only 100,000 lines. Windows that you might run on your IBM PC, Windows is 14 million lines of code. Just to put the two in comparison, 100,000 lines. It's so simple. The white paper, 6 pages that explain the whole thing. And a lot of times the best inventions are the most elegant anyway, right? So if you looked at the program and found out, and really dug into the fundamentals of this thing, you realize that what it really is not only the invention of money that's outside the hands of anybody. There's Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared. Nobody knows who that person or people are. Nobody knows where they are, and they've been gone since 2014. Could be dead for all anybody knows. And they're unlikely to ever show up. That's a big part of the story. Because who do you arrest? If you're a government wanting to shut it down, who do you go put on the stand? There's nobody. It's kind, I don't know if you guys will, if you're familiar with this analogy, but it's kind of like a virus. Once it escapes the lab, it's there, right? Like, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. And that's kind of how the Bitcoin program is. Once it's on hundreds of thousands of computers, all networked together with the internet, how do you reverse that? You don't. And that's why it's now 13 years old, and it's grown like crazy. And the fundamentals that people discovered was that it's the invention of digital finitude. I would say scarcity, but it needs to be stated as finitude. The problem with all the currencies of the world and all the monies going all the way back to Lydia is that they can be controlled and the supply can be messed with by the governments who benefit from the new supply. The thing that Bitcoin does is nobody can change its supply. The issuance of new Bitcoins is fixed. The overall amount, there will only ever be 21 million of them. And the amount of new ones that come out all the time is controlled by the computer program, which can't be changed. It would take a consensus of hundreds of thousands of computers. 3 people can't decide where to go for lunch. You're not going to get tens of thousands of computers to all agree on a program change. It's open source, but it ain't changing. So there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins issued, ever. The last one will be issued in the year 2140. Most of us will be a little tired by then. 19 million and more have already been issued. So it's issuing on a set schedule, less and less over time. And when you look at that, if you understand the economics of it, it's the only thing outside of our human time that supply of it doesn't react to the demand. I might want to live a lot longer than God might have planned for me to live, but there's nothing I can do about that. I can eat salads and walk a lot, stuff like that, and play the odds. But there's nothing I can really, truly do to buy more time. My demand and supply are not linked. The only other thing like that in the world of human existence that we've ever seen now is Bitcoin. This is why it's so extraordinary, because there's nothing you can do to change the supply. It relies on rules, not rulers. And that's a huge difference. So if you're looking to take the fruit of your labor and store it in a way that's not subject to tampering or confiscation or permissions, Bitcoin offers up even more than what gold used to. Some of you guys, maybe in your life, you're like me and you've probably held gold at different points for those same reasons. The problem with gold is it's heavy, it's hard to transport, it's hard to spend. It endangers you when you store it. People might find out you have it. Bitcoin is often cyberspace. If you just have a few keywords memorized, you can go anywhere in the world and log back into the network and access your Bitcoin. You could escape a country that's being torn by calamity. You could end up in a refugee camp, and as soon as you could make it somewhere at an internet cafe, you could connect back into your wealth. You just carry it in your head. Nothing's ever been like that before. But the big attractive piece of it for most people, at least in the United States, where probably those things aren't going to happen and we won't be forced to do those kind of things, is it's a great hedge against the rampant inflation that's taken place with the debasement of our currency. It at least offers itself up as a very interesting alternative for a way to store some of the fruit of your labor in something that can't that can't be debased and shrunk. As a matter of fact, because more and more people are finding out about this, and it's gone from just cypherpunks to criminals to gamblers and speculators to individual investors. Now, institutional investors have found out about this, and many of the hedge funds in the world now have at least a portion of their holdings in Bitcoin. Now it's even found its way into corporate treasuries, where billionaires and their big companies are now putting billions of dollars of Bitcoin in their corporate treasury, because and the way they describe it is what I mentioned earlier. It's like their corporate treasuries are held in dollars, and they're like an ice cube melting. If they're willing to admit to us that inflation's 6.8%, probably it's a lot higher. Let me read you some real numbers and show you why people are so interested in figuring out a way to keep their money in a protection of that's going to hold its value over time. In the last 12 months, since this is November data, so this is as of the end of November of 21, they reported the CPI to be 6.8%. Gasoline was up 50%. New cars and trucks were up 11%. Used cars were up 31%. Matter of fact, it was a pretty good game to buy a new car if you could get one and then sell it for more than you paid for it. I mean, that's never happened before. Furniture was up 7%. Fast food was up 8%. Household energy up 12%. Groceries up 6.4%. Restaurants 7.9%. Clothing up 5%. Most of those numbers are bigger than the reported CPI. We all kind of feel it. And yet, many people on fixed incomes or living off their savings are losing ground at the rate that that's going on. You've got a melting ice cube, and then the money's, the prices of things are going up like that. So Bitcoin offers itself up as a new savings technology. And there's even interesting things you can do with it. I had a guy talking to me the other day, and he said, well, my son is the manager of my estate. He's appointed to be the trustee when I pass. He said, if I'm buying this Bitcoin, how does that play in there? And I said, well, they make these hardware wallets that are like little thumb drives, and you just plug that into your computer or your laptop or even your tablet, and you can drag the information to access the Bitcoins into your thumb drive and hand that to your son. Done. That's it. Doesn't have to go through any banks, doesn't have to go through any approvals. You got wealth on a thumb drive, handed it to his son sticks it in a safe, good to go. So there's really interesting things like that, and there's so much to be explored with it that if you're interested in investing at all, it's something that ought to be given some serious consideration. If you're interested in preserving the fruit of some of your labor or figuring out how to pass on some of that fruit, it deserves some serious consideration. Now, there's really interesting things we can talk about the computer program and how it works, about how it hasn't been hacked in 13 years and why, how governments can't shut it down. China just tried to ban it, and all it did was send everybody that runs the machines that run Bitcoin out of the country into other nations, and it all came right back up again. There's lots of those things. I tried to touch on them in the book in simple, fun ways just to kind of give people an idea, because I feel like this is so important. One of my friends calls Bitcoin freedom money. He says it's almost like giving freedom back to the people in a time when it seems like so many things are marching against freedom. Bitcoin's running in the other direction. It's offering people freedom over their money. Now, and it all depends on your particular situation and where you're at, what your risk comfort is and all those things. But I read something one time by an author, and he said, what if you put 1% of your portfolio in Bitcoin? Just 1%. He said, and then pretend we're all wrong. It blows up tomorrow. You wake up and read it in the Wall Street Journal. Well, that was crazy. It's all gone. Bitcoin's dead. However you can envision that happening. I can't imagine how it could be dead. But just pretend it all goes to zero. You lost 1% of your portfolio. You're probably not going to notice. But what if it keeps growing at 100x, at 100 times like it has been? It's averaged 200% a year appreciation now for 13 years. If you would have bought it 10 years ago, it's up over 2 million% from 10 years ago. If it happened 100 times, if 100x's again, you would double your portfolio, and probably you'd notice that. So I thought that was really good investing logic. So for all those reasons and more, I think it's worth people's consideration. It's certainly a fascinating subject to study because it goes from computer science to geopolitics to finances, and it crosses all kinds of different areas and categories of study. It's just endlessly deep, and there's some great podcasts you can listen to and learn more about it. But that's about the best flyby I can give it in terms of where it began, what it is, why it might matter to you, why it might be something, a curiosity or something for serious study. And I think I'll stop there and give us just a few minutes to either ask questions or escape if you're ready to get out. You're in masks and I'm not, so I feel for you. So I appreciate your patience. You're a great attentive audience. And if we'd like to take questions, I'll leave that up to the staff here, and we'll stick around as long as anybody wants. Yeah, yes, sir.
So I have two questions.
I have been reading in a technical journal about the fact that they are trying to mine Bitcoin, but that the energy requirements are so huge that you almost have to have 2 nuclear plants feeding the computers. What in the world is going on there? What is that about?
Okay, great. The question for the viewers on the camera there is Bitcoin, the game that the computers play to win the Bitcoin game and get new Bitcoins issued to them is called mining. And that game requires a lot of computer energy, which eats up a lot of electricity. And what's up with that? That's the question. Well, it's true. Now, that amount of electricity that's burned to play this game, these computers play this game to get the new Bitcoin issued to them. Every 10 minutes, there's a new game, and they get new Bitcoins issued to them. The amount of that energy, you can look at that as the wall of protection. If you look at the world money supply and you add up the cost of the militaries, the banking system, and the central banks and all of that, and you look at the cost, their cost to protect their monetary system is somewhere around a 25% cost of the value of what they protect every year. If you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is protected by about 20 basis points. Its market cap is about $1 trillion right now, and the sum of all of its electricity that it takes globally is about 20 basis points. So it's the cheapest defense of the most value anywhere in the world. But the numbers themselves are huge. Bitcoin uses about as much electricity as the state of Arkansas every day. Like the same amount Arkansas uses Bitcoin. That's significant. Interestingly enough, that electricity, the Bitcoin miners win by finding cheap electricity. So you know where they go to get cheap electricity? They go to hydrostatic power plants, places where there's turbines on rivers and waterfalls, because lots of those places are remote from civilization, and those power plants they either have to let the turbine spool and not generate more electricity, or they have to find a way to store it. And electricity is very hard to transport over distances. Now I'm speaking about Dave's expertise, so he'll tell me if I go off in the weeds. So what Bitcoin miners have done is they've set up a lot of their shops near these hydroelectric plants. As a matter of fact, the country of El Salvador just declared Bitcoin legal tender. They're the first country in the world to do that. And they're setting up mining rigs on the edge of their active volcano. So they're going to use volcanic energy that otherwise isn't being used to generate Bitcoin. So most of that energy, 70-some% of the electricity that runs the Bitcoin game worldwide is being done with wind farms, solar farms, hydrostatic electricity, and volcano and those kind of things, and where they flare gas, where they flare the gas at oil wells and oil rigs, which are remote, and they can't collect that gas if there's not a pipeline nearby, that natural gas. They just flare it. They just burn it into the atmosphere, and it sends all that methane into the atmosphere, which isn't good for it, and it's just wasted fuel. So they now have Bitcoin rigs and semi-trailers, and they pull them up to those flaring stations, and they burn that gas to turn turbines to generate electricity to run the mining equipment. So 70-some% of Bitcoin's electricity now is at the margins. It's reclaiming electricity that otherwise wouldn't be used. And there's big movements afoot to get it to 100%. So although the consumption level is high, it's important because it protects it, and it's driving the adoption of alternative energy sources. So excellent question. Hopefully I answered it. One more?
No.
That was enough.
Yeah, it was a straightforward question, but a long answer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Very informative. I think at this point, considering timing, and we try to hold to our 4 o'clock time, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
He does pretty good for being a graduate engineer, doesn't he? Undergraduate and graduate engineer.
Thank you, everybody.
From my alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University.
Why don't you hold that and let Chris draw?
All right.
Brandon, you want to give out the?
Sure.
All right.
We'll go ahead and do our door prizes. The first two are donated, as usual, by Vidya. So please, if you are dealing with Vidya at the bank, thank her, because she does this on her own each week, each month for us. Okay, first number.
First number is 316-366.
316-366. Over here.
Willie. All right.
Another one? All right. 77, oh, this is different. 7735-690.
7735690. And now we're going to give away some books that Chris has given to us. Please, if you are a winner and it is not a topic that interests you, please pass it on to someone who is extremely interested or donate it to the library so we will have more than one copy. By the way, Chris, I think I'm now at a 1.5. Okay, would you draw another one?
All right. Next is 316. Didn't we call that one already? 361.
316-361. There we are.
Our 5.
Our 5.
All right. All right. 316. You're going to think we're cheating. 360.
316-360.
Okay. I got to shake these up a little better. Two more. 316-362.
Oh, 316, look. I think we should go on.
Okay, do another one. I swear I'm shuffling them. I'd be shot in Vegas. 7735698.
7735698.
Over here.
All right. One more.
Okay, well, we went ahead and gave it.
That it?
One more.
Oh. 316377.
316-377. There you are.
All right.
This is the one for the library, right?
Yep.
Chris, thank you very much. I'm sure that we all learned a great deal, and we do appreciate it.
We announce next month's.
Why don't you do it? Dave is going to tell you a little bit about next month's program, which is certainly on a very different vein.
All right, next month, our Residents Association meeting will be on Valentine's Day. It just happens, the calendar and the calendar for the Residents Association meeting, the second Monday, winds up on Valentine's Day. We have a special Valentine's Day treat planned. Our treat will be a oldie weds game. Has anybody heard of the newlyweds game? Okay, since it's Springmore and you've probably been married a little bit longer than just a couple of days or a couple of weeks, we're going to call it the oldie weds game. It'll have the same format that the newlyweds game had, with 4 couples and 6 questions. That will be interesting. We have not chosen the couples yet. We wanted to make sure that we announced it at this meeting before we ask couples to be participants. And I think it promises to be a lot of fun. We're going to make sure, I'm no Bob Eubanks, but I'm trying my best to be a Bob Eubanks. If I fail, I'll ask Brandon to be Bob Eubanks. But thank you for coming. Thank you for your attention and your interest in the meeting. And Chris, we thank you so much for a fascinating tour through Bitcoin land. And we'll have books in the library as of tomorrow. And you can check out a book, and you'll find the book fascinating. Thank you.